We're live on LinkedIn, we're live on YouTube, we're live on Twitter, and I think you've connected your channels as well. Is it your LinkedIn channel
That's right, yeah.
Connected? So, yeah, we're live on a couple of LinkedIn. I could see that at the top. I didn't even need to ask you that question. We're live on a couple of LinkedIn channels, live on YouTube, live on Twitter. Before we jump into usual question stuff and introductions and all that jazz, I usually just go through some bits that everyone will be getting bored of by now who listens. Just to touch on what EdTech Live is, it's a follow-on from a newsletter I started writing on LinkedIn. That's now got close to 1,000 subscribers, I think. I'm hoping it tips over 1,000 this week, but we'll see. And it's a place for me to connect leaders in education or EdTech or both with a wider audience and spotlight their experience, etc. And that in turn means it's a chance for me to learn, a chance for my guests to learn, and a chance for those listening to learn as well. The only other thing I'd say at the start is don't forget to subscribe on either YouTube, or I think you can repost on LinkedIn. I'm not sure you can subscribe to it, but subscribe on YouTube, comment away on LinkedIn, comment away on Twitter. And if you've got any questions, if you comment on LinkedIn, I think you have to press the enter button twice, but we'll be able to see your questions at this end as well. So that's the usual spiel that I start with. And then I dip into how we met. And we've not actually physically met, have we? We've not met face-to-face.
No.
I think my recollection is, I think I responded to something you put on LinkedIn around AI and introduced you to a former colleague of mine who wrote a book on AI, Jill Foster.
That's
and then
right.
we've stayed
almost the epitome of LinkedIn, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
It's what it was built for.
It's what it was built for, but I think far too often not what it was used for. I mean, the amount of people I talk to say, I never accept a connection request from somebody I don't know. And I'm like, that's not what it's doing. Yeah, why? That's not what it's designed for. And you honestly would not believe how many people don't accept a connection request unless they actually have met you in real life. But hey ho, that's their loss and our gain, I think. So last thing before I ask you to introduce yourself, I've given this podcast a really terrible title. So I've called it A Day in the Life of a Sixth Form Leader or something like that. And that's because I really lazily, when I went away to Prague with my wife recently, I said, oh no, I've got to get this in the diary and I've got to get it set up. So sat in the airport, I was beavering away like, right, I've just got to put a title in there that's vague enough for people to get an idea of what we're talking about. Most of the podcast will be about experiencing AI, I think. So we'll just see how it goes. Natural conversation.
I mean, that does sound like a day in the life of a vice principal, to be honest. AI is dominating everything we do at the minute, so it's not too far from the truth.
Decent. Well, that puts us in good stead then. So before we jump into all the AI stuff, do you want to tell people a little bit about yourself and what it is you do?
Yeah, of course. So I'm 42 years old. I worked out of education at the start of my career, and my career took a bit of a weird tangent. Started in banking, moved into leisure, from leisure to leisure and education, and then progressed through the ranks in education. More recently, I was appointed as a vice principal at Barton Peveril Sixth Form College, which is the largest sixth form college in the country, and one of the highest achieving. So I've got a broad remit, which includes finance, estates, catering and retail, exams, the management information system, and IT. And I think that's where the AI came from. I was in a strategic meeting with the rest of the leadership team, and the principal, Rob, said, oh, Chris, you're going to lead our AI strategy. And I was like, great. What's AI? So that literally, I started as a complete novice, knowing nothing about it. Yeah. And ever since, I've just had to immerse myself in the content that's just out there.
Do you know what? Sometimes I think it helps. I think it might be my learning style, but sometimes I find it easier to start from ground zero than I do halfway through, like knowing absolutely nothing about a subject, because I totally immerse myself in it.
And there's no preconceived conceptions.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely. I was going to jump straight into AI related questions here, but following on from how you described your career, just one that interests me. Do you think it's been how beneficial do you think it's been having all that experience outside of education and bringing it into education?
I think it's been hugely beneficial because it works with my personality. I'm entrepreneurial.
Right.
So I brought a commercial mindset to education, but my time out of education was shorter now than my time in education.
Yeah.
But I think that understanding the commercial sector, the way that the world works, has definitely helped me in education. And my route to leadership has been the unusual. So I didn't go to university. From college, I went straight into employment.
Yeah.
Then I graduated last year from my degree as an apprentice, and I started my master's this year. So nice. I kind of have done things a bit back to front, but that equally has been a benefit because I've learned skills on the job that have enabled me to then apply the theory to them, rather than going into an employment and saying, in theory, this is how you do it. So although it's not the conventional route, it certainly worked out so far.
I asked that question because I'd worked with two multi-academy trust CEOs in the past who were both from different sectors, and were both really strong in education, and they just brought a totally different mindset. So that's why I asked. I've just been nosy, really, I think. So if we jump on to, we talked about AI, and that's how we originally connected. So we originally connected over AI, so it makes perfect sense for the majority of these questions to be about that.
Yeah.
So if I jump straight into, do you think AI has a big role to play in education? How big do you think that role is? Because it's probably a bit daft framing it the way I have. How big do you think the role is?
Well, it's interesting. You and I were speaking briefly before this started, and I said to you, I think it's got the scope to be the biggest revolution society's seen, certainly the biggest technological revolution. So it's transformational as a technology, as a tool, and it's going to be far-reaching. Teaching and learning inevitably in time will be impacted. Cybersecurity, the business services, but ultimately, I believe it will revolutionise society in general, not just education. Education will be one element of its reach. It's going to transcend sector, role, age. AI is going to change society in general.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, it's already starting to do it, isn't it? And I don't think we've even touched
Scratch the surface.
We've not even started. I always find it interesting when I get in debates with people about it taking jobs away. And again, we touched on it briefly before. We just got to adapt. I always use, I might have used this on a previous podcast as well, but I always highlight a debate I had with someone on LinkedIn last year around AI. I'll not name anyone, but the said person was in marketing. And I'd actually reached out to them I'd crafted a message, and they thought it was an AI. I'd crafted it using AI. I hadn't. I'd wrote it myself, so it wasn't generated by AI. But they got really offended. And they were like, "Oh, you're trying to replace our jobs and this, that, and the other." And I ended up signing the debate off by saying, technology always evolves. So you look at farmers, those that use technology like combine harvesters and that's which had classes technology, they carried on, farming. That they were fruitful and probably earn a lot more money than a lot of us. And you look at, I bet you on a Friday night when you've had a bad week at work and you want to order a takeaway and you jump on Just Eat, you don't give a second's thought to the guy who used to get all the money and is now getting 20% less. So you use technology yourself and you just evolve. If you don't do that in your job and you don't change how you do stuff, then you're going to get left behind. The technology is not going to go away.
Look at the high street. These things, Amazon have replaced the high street. And those people that were retail assistants now, typically, they're in new jobs, they're in new roles. You can't halt evolution. What you can do is evolve with it. And that's just how we're going to have to play the growth of artificial intelligence in society.
Yeah. The high street one. Have you seen the Amazon shops?
Yeah.
So we went to Bet last year. Dave, who just walked behind me a minute ago, we went to Bet last year. And at the Excel Centre, they've got one of those Amazon shops, and you walk in, you have to scan your phone on the way in. It knows what you've picked up in the shop. I don't know how it does it. It must be based on weight or where you are using really sensitive GPS or something, maybe both. And then you just walk out and it charges your card.
Yeah.
You don't. I mean, absolutely crackers.
The tube station. Do you remember there used to be somebody sat in a box and you bought a ticket? So
Yeah.
they were getting paid a wage, you know.
Yeah.
They're now been replaced by a contactless panel at the entrance to the tube or train station.
Yeah.
It's just what happens in society.
Yeah.
And AI is just the next wave of revolution or evolution. There'll be another one, general artificial intelligence, that will supersede AI in time.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's fair to say that we both see AI as a transformational tool. How do you see that in schools?
So the problem in education is typically the sector's slow to adapt or adopt new technology, and that's often down to financial constraints. New technology is expensive, often unproven. You'd have to adapt teaching and learning to be able to harness it. But the reality is it's already having an impact. Large language models, so things like ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Meta, those large language models are out there and are being accessed by children. Snapchat has an AI filter or an AI bot. So schools are already having to embrace AI and understand it. If you do an assignment at university, it has to go through something called Turnitin, which is an automation that checks that you haven't plagiarized, basically.
Right.
Well, that's going to have to evolve to see if it's not plagiarized, but is it genuine or has it been created by a large language model? So AI will have to be transformative for schools. And equally, the children, the students, whether they be primary, secondary, FE, they're going to be used to AI. They're digital natives. They were born with technology. You know, most 5-year-olds are better on their phone than I am.
Yeah.
So AI is going to revolutionize schools. The issue is, can the schools react quick enough without getting into a political debate? Will the funding be there? And if the funding is there, is that the best use of it? You know, with the issues around RAC and the concrete and failing buildings, poor infrastructure, will technology be where the money's spent? But at the moment, equally, I think it's probably the biggest win for educational institutions. You look at things like teacher marking, marking assessments and assignments, business functions. There's opportunity there for AI to come in and revolutionise a sector.
Yeah, 100%. I like when you mentioned Turnitin, was it? Turnitin. I mean, they have got a job on their hands because I use Grammarly, so I'd consider my written English reasonable, I think, but I always like to run it through Grammarly, and that checks for plagiarism. So I'm guessing you could just spit something out of ChatGPT, drop it into Grammarly. I mean, it's got its work cut out, hasn't it, to try and stop plagiarism.
And all of these technologies are evolving quicker than we can keep up with them in education, and that's the reality. Yeah. So it's about adopting the right technologies at the right time, and that's probably the hardest bit.
Yeah, definitely. So it segues us quite nicely into who do you think it can have the biggest impact on or the greatest impact on in education?
I mean,
students, teachers.
That's going to depend on how quickly the changes occur and which institutions engage. I'd like to think AI should have the most positive impact on the student, because if it's used independently by them, it can aid them. If it's used in the classroom by the teachers, it can aid their learning. So I'd like to think it would be the students. And that's certainly, if we're talking about education, that's our customer base. They're the principal stakeholders. They're the people we're targeting. So I'd like to think it will have the biggest impact on them in time. It could revolutionize the teaching practice, preparation materials for lessons and lesson plans, marking, as I've already mentioned, cover work. So it could revolutionize things for the teacher, an industry, a sector that we know in the future looks like it could be struggling, dwindling numbers of people getting into the industry.
Yeah,
that's nationally proven, statistically proven. So it could have such a wide-ranging impact. But then you look at the external stakeholders, like parents or guardians.
Yeah,
you know, a good quality chatbot, not the one that we've all used to, that you ask the same question 6 times and it gives you the same answer. Please ask it again. But a good chatbot will be able to support parents and give them responses quicker than potentially a human can. It will make access to information more readily available 24/7, like a website that can answer questions.
Yeah, that'd be really valuable. We've done a bit of research on that. I'm looking to my right, me and Dave and Tom. We've done a bit of research on that, and we think there's some gains to be had there as well. I like that you referred to students as customer base, because that is exactly what they are. And if you're in any other business, you'd be referring to it as customer base. They're who you're there to serve.
I think it's become too easy to too easy to look at customers like students and think that they're just going to come to you. Gone are the days where a child goes to the school at the end of their road because it's what they do.
Yeah.
They go to the school or the college they choose. They are customers. Yeah. They will look across the market like we do as customers, as consumers. They will look across the market and they will look for the one that meets their need. Yeah. And often it will be value. So it's about the right provision, the quality of output, the quality of experience. So they are customers. And again, that's where AI can come into it. You could have innovative environments. So you've seen immersive classrooms. They could have creative content. It could be something that draws those customers into one organization over another.
Yeah, definitely. I think without sticking on the question for too long, I think in particular sixth forms and colleges as well have got better at working as a collective. So I remember I used to work with local authorities many years ago, and I always felt like the sixth form provision was really diluted, and every college offered every course, and that I think they've got a lot better from my experience. Well, I've got a teenage daughter, 2 teenage daughters. Have got a lot better at going, right, well, we've got a specialism in this and we're a specialism in this. So there's the choice is still there, but they've got a choice around quality as well now, I think.
And I think a big part of that has come down to us looking at it as a business function.
Yeah.
Every shop sells everything. You're going to struggle. It's what is your USP or what is your principal product?
Yeah.
So it's about tailoring it in that way. So yeah, I totally agree.
Definitely. So loads and loads of positives. I think we could talk all day. And I said, right, before we went live, I was saying to Chris, this will go really quick, and we're on like 17 minutes. So do you see any negatives or challenges?
Look, I don't want to scaremonger, but I can see principally in the first instance more challenges than I can positives quickly, because the positives will take time to adapt. But the negatives are far ranging, aren't they? It's going to pose ethical dilemmas. That's the reality. It's going to touch on all aspects of society, technology, and human values. So you've got things like bias and discrimination. We've seen articles in the press around some of the large language models having that. Privacy. So if you think about the evolution of the GDPR from data protection and digital privacy, that's going to be one. Accountability. If the information provided is inaccurate or biased or discriminates, who's got that accountability? Who makes the decisions on behalf of the large language models when programming them? Accountability links to that. We've spoken briefly about job displacement, and I can see that there will be job displacement, but I also firmly believe there will be growth in new jobs. Half the students that we're teaching now will do jobs in the future I can't comprehend and never thought of. And that's the reality. So new jobs will evolve. But you've got things like security, sophisticated cyber attacks, data breaches, things like that. Autonomy and control. What we don't want to do is see social manipulation where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, because the rich can afford access and the equipment and develop artificial intelligence and the poorer can't. There's the environmental impacts. We need to consider the fact that there's carbon emissions through technological use. So there are massive ethical dilemmas, but we're balancing innovation and ethical considerations to try to ensure we're doing what's best for society. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's not the way it maybe sounds. If somebody's just switched on at question 5, they're panicking now. But it's about understanding that the government, the governments around the world need to make sure that there's rigorous, robust checks in place, and that these systems aren't, able to be manipulated or be biased, be exclusively available, that they are readily available.
Yeah, I mean, all makes perfect sense. And you mentioned job displacement. I've still got the stat open. So a connection of mine was recently invited to. I'm a little bit jealous here, but invited to LinkedIn HQ in Dublin. She's a recruiter, and one of the stats that she came back with was that 85% of jobs that will exist in 2030 have not been invented yet. And that, I just think, let that sink in. That's what, 6 years away.
Yeah,
85% of jobs have not even invented.
Yeah,
Blows my mind.
I'm 42. I don't consider myself old, but I remember the phone box, dial-up internet.
Yeah.
Information technology at school. You thought you'd won the lottery because you got to go on the Acorn computer, the only one in the school.
Yeah.
The technology moves so rapidly, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, definitely. To what extent have you implemented it in your college then so far?
So, look, like most organisations, we're early adopters at the moment. I think that the key principal thing we're doing at the moment is a digital innovation strategy. I think defining our goals and our objectives, where AI is going to play a sound role, where it's cost effective, where it's efficient, they're the principal decisions you have to take. Because what's going to happen is all these shiny things are going to come out, and it's going to be very easy to follow the rabbit down the rabbit hole and spend an awful lot of money for very little gain.
Yeah.
And I think at the moment, my advice to any educational establishment is take a step back. What do you want to achieve? What does that look like? And then roadmap how you're going to get there. Because I went to the BET show this year, and absolutely every stall advertised AI supported, AI inspired, AI. It's the new buzzword. It's the new buzzword. And I remember technology when the smart boards came out. So the old interactive whiteboards. And I think every school in the country purchased one. And in 2 years, they were glorified projector boards. The pens had been lost. They didn't calibrate. No one knew how to use them. Yeah. So it's about making sure that we do this wisely, a considered business approach, and not a scattergun. Let's buy this software. Let's buy that software. It's AI, because it'll be very, very easy to waste money. And as we know, this is not a time for the education sector to be wasting money.
Definitely not. Sometimes it makes perfect sense to not be first, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sometimes you're better off. I mean, nobody wants to be last, I don't think. But sometimes you wait until that second or third tranche and learn from everyone else.
Let somebody else make the big mistakes.
Yeah, definitely. I think the people who are doing this responsibly, though, they'll do the legwork with schools and not let them waste money. Yeah. So, the responsible providers out there will be working with schools to get stuff right and not charging them. I know there'll be a cost associated. There's always a cost in there. There'll be time or something like that. But I think responsible providers will support schools best they can. So sticking with AI for this question then, what's the biggest lesson you've learnt so far? So you've been looking at AI for a while. Obviously, I follow you on LinkedIn.
Yeah. And do you know what? I've learned so much. I remember I didn't know what a large language model was. I didn't even understand what generative AI is. And I'm far from an expert, but I've learned a huge amount. The biggest thing I've learned, the best lesson I've learned, is that I'm not an expert. I think it's easy for people to go, I know a lot about this. Yeah. Now I've read a book or I've researched it. I've listened to podcasts. I've spoken to people. You're never truly an expert until you could teach it, in my mind, from start to end. And I'm not there. And I have no issue consulting with an expert when I need to. It's about understanding your limitations. Like anything we do in society, isn't it? Yeah. It's where do my expertise or my knowledge end? Yeah. Like somebody else now is going to play a part in my evolution. So I think it's to not be afraid to admit that you don't know it all.
Yeah. I think I'd go a step further as well. I think I've obviously read this somewhere, and there might be a well-known quote, something along the lines of, you can't claim to be an expert until you've taught somebody who can teach somebody else to be an expert, sort of thing. Yeah. So I totally agree with that. We're always learning, aren't we? Definitely. And AI, I'm not sure we'll ever finish learning either. To be honest, it moves so quick.
I think almost every day I have a conversation with somebody about AI where I feel out of my depth.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it. One of the computer science teachers here, Cambridge graduate, absolute genius. Had a conversation with him today. I felt like I knew nothing.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it. Somebody always knows more.
It's a bit like me when my daughter brings a year 8 homework home.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that feeling. Yeah.
So we've touched on your background before education, and you've obviously made that transition really successfully. For anyone who was watching, how hard was that transition?
I think if you're commercially minded, it is an unusual industry to come into. Education is, as I've said, sort of typically slow adopters, slow changers as a sector.
Yeah.
The fact that the government can change frequently, and then the objective or the priority changes frequently, curriculum reform, academisation, free schools, all of these things ring bells, So the transition was not as straightforward as it could be. But it was an enjoyable one. It is a rewarding industry. The amount of people that sort of question why somebody gets into education sector, it is the reward. But I was also fortunate enough that my commercial outlook played a benefit. It made me reasonably unique in the sector I was in.
Yeah.
And that unique mindset led me to pursue my degree. And learn new skills in business management that I didn't have previously. And that evolution led me to this role as being vice principal at the largest sixth form college in the country.
Yeah.
And that transition was possibly harder than the other one because I went from being operational day to day, where am I, with the brief look at the horizon to continuously horizon scanning now, thinking strategically, with a brief eye on where we are today. And that the AI is a prime example of that. We've got IT systems galore. We're installing interactive TVs around the campus. Yeah. But that's here now. That's under control. My focus is on the future. Where are we going to be? So that transition from the secondary sector to the sixth form college sector was a bigger transition. But equally, I think it was a more rewarding one, if I'm truly honest. Yeah. It was, for me, it was the right transition at the right time.
I love that you've gone it feels like it's full circle. So you've gone from learning into a career, into education, and you're still learning and learning, like you mentioned earlier, your masters. So still learning actual degree level learning or higher.
I don't want to depress anyone listening, but I worked out I've got 3 decades left at work. 3 decades. When you think of it like that, it would be arrogant or naive to think you know now all you're going to need to know to get you through the next 30 years. Yeah. So, I'm doing my MBA, and after that, I'll see where else. Who knows? Maybe a PhD. But I'm in the growth mindset. I'm in the process of learning and developing and evolving as a person and a professional. Yeah. And I think that's important. I think for the children that we're educating, the young people here, the students, I've got tutor groups. I think it's important for them that they see I'm not just telling them to get an education or to try hard. I'm doing it myself.
Yeah, you beat me to it. I was going to say that. I was going to say, I bet it's really nice for the students to see that you're doing what you're asking them to do.
And that I'm struggling just as much and asking for them for help.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't have to check your assignments, do we? You're not got anyone in college to do your assignments. Yeah. So for anyone else who's watching this today, then it might be a slightly different answer to what I anticipated this, and they feel inspired to make a similar move to you. What advice would you give them? Is there one bit of advice that jumps out that you go,
yeah? Look, very little comes easy in life. You get in what you put out. Education's a rewarding sector, but it's not an easy sector. Yeah. But it's like everything in life, isn't it? It feels like the harder you work, the luckier you get. Yeah. I don't know if there's any correlation there, but education's a sector where that resonates very much. The harder you work, the more you get, the more rewarding it becomes.
Yeah. So to just do the hard yards then.
Take the step, take the leap.
Yeah.
Take the leap. What have you got to lose?
Yeah, love it. Love it. So the next two are really quick fire. So the first, and I ask these of everybody that comes on. So what one thing have you seen while working, I'm going to say in education rather than schools, that's made you go, wow, that is making a big difference to these students' lives? Or teachers' lives. Teachers' lives.
The pastoral curriculum. It doesn't matter if you're looking at secondary or now, for me, sixth form college. We're trying to teach young people about being young people. We're not teaching them maths, English, science. Yes, we do that, but it's broader than that. We're trying to teach them some ethics, some morals, how to be safe. It's so broad. I mean, only recently I did a student podcast on men's mental health.
Yeah.
Because it's about trying to break down barriers. It's trying to broaden horizons, open minds, and just help shape people to be good young people.
I love the idea that when you say good young people, that they enter your establishment and they leave just a better version of themselves. And some of that will be academic, some of it will be as an individual, some of it will be, like you say, the morals, the principles, and you're just gearing them up for the next step in their life, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Love the idea of that. So the last one, and I'm assuming you've watched one of these before. I always say to everyone, one book or podcast that you'd recommend to everyone listening, and then I always follow up with, but nobody else has paid any attention to me, and they've all had more than one. So knock yourself out.
Right. No, I've been good. I've got one, and it's The Coming Wave by Mustafa Suleyman. So it's AI based. It will scare you and excite you in equal measure. It was the first foray for me into AI.
Yeah.
And about 4 chapters in, I thought that Terminator was a documentary. That's what, anyone with a child called John Connor, protect them. That's where I was. By the end of the book, I was excited about what AI can do for us. So, if you've got aspirations to understand AI and what's happening and where it could go, that's a very, very good book.
I'll put a link in the comments. I always do that for everyone, so I'll put a link in the comments. So then, before we wrap up, so I've loved this, dead useful. I love the insight to your approach in school or in college, etc. I'm sure there are other people watching this. Where can those people find you? Where's the best place to find Chris?
So, I am all over LinkedIn these days. Definitely LinkedIn, Chris Loveday. You'll find me. I look like this on my photo, except maybe younger. But yeah, all over LinkedIn.
I've done a side profile, and I've done a side profile with the worst nose anyone's ever seen. So I definitely stand out on LinkedIn. So that leaves me just the only thing I've got left to say is don't forget to do the stuff I said at the start. So don't forget to like, share, subscribe, repost, tell people about the podcast. If you want to be on it, let me know. I have got, I think, guests up until the 23rd of May. So then any Thursday after that, I've got availability. So if you're out there and you're like, I'd love to do this, let me know. And other than that, it's just to say thanks to you, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on. And thanks to everyone who's listened. I'll do my stuff in the comments and fire any questions in if anyone's got any after, and we'll answer them.